everyone, and welcome back to Faith Brynel Talks Law, the podcast. I'm Faith Brynel, and if you're new here, this podcast is where we talk about the realities of building a career in law, navigating through the profession, and developing the skills needed to succeed. Alongside solo episodes, the podcast also features conversations with guest speakers from different industries, and also from the legal industry. For example, I've spoken with guests so far such as Mike, the co-founder of Flake Bake, whose episode will be out very soon. The aim is to give you as listeners a broader perspective on careers, ambition and personal development. Today's episode is one I'm really excited to share with you because it's a question I get asked quite often. How do you know if becoming a barrister is the right career for you? So, when people think about the bar, they often picture the courtroom moments we see on TV. Powerful speeches, dramatic cross-examinations, and persuasive arguments that win the case. And whilst advocacy is certainly part of the role, the reality of life at the bar is much broader than that. Now, the first thing to understand is that the bar is fundamentally about advocacy and persuasion. Barristers are specialists in presenting legal arguments, advising clients, and representing cases in court or in tribunals. So, to that end, one of the first questions you should ask yourself is whether you enjoy analysing complex problems and communicating ideas clearly and confidently. You need to be somebody who is comfortable expressing an argument and defending a position. As an aspiring barrister, reading politics at King's College London definitely did get me equipped and ready to start to pick a side, but also to defend that side as well. Additionally, my debating experience is a way in which I have actually developed and honed in my advocacy skills as well. So advocacy is not only about speaking, it's not just oral, it's about listening carefully. You're building your soft skills of communication, you're thinking strategically, and you're responding under pressure. So another important aspect is to consider is independence. So many barristers work in a self-employed environment. So that means that you're managing your own workload, you're developing your own professional relationships, and you're building a reputation within your field. And so some people thrive in that environment because it offers autonomy, it offers freedom and intellectual challenge, whilst others prefer a more structured workplace. And indeed, some barristers, you can be an employed barrister. However, most barristers are self-employed. Let's actually look at the differences between being a self-employed barrister and being an employed barrister. So self-employed barristers are independent practitioners, usually in chambers, managing their own taxes, high-risk income and business costs, whilst offering flexibility through their varied court work. On the other hand, employed barristers work for organisations such as the Crown Prosecution Service, government companies or other companies, or even law firms, and they're earning a stable salary with benefits such as maternity and paternity leave, paid leave, but have less autonomy. So I want to just run through a little bit of information on the self-employed and employed barrister dichotomy. And really, if you are a self-employed barrister, which is most common, the structure is you're independent, or a tenant in chambers, you're sharing overhead costs, your income is varied, and you're paid via fees from cases, you don't get paid holiday or sick leave. In terms of your tax, you're responsible for your national insurance contributions and for your own tax as well. With your workload, you have, however, autonomy and direct control over which cases you accept, subject to the cab rank rule. Now, I want to just tabernacle briefly on the cab rank rule because when I attended a pupillage session last week with the University of Law, and that was the question that I had to present on. It was on the cab rank rule. And the cab rank rule is an ethical obligation in English law which requires barristers to accept any case within their practice area if they are available and properly compensated, regardless of the client's identity or nature of the case. Now, it's up to you whether you believe it should be scrapped or not, but that can be a question that you are asked in pupillage applications or in scholarship. It's not what we're talking about today, but it's something to be aware of. So the cab rank rule is based on the principle that, like a taxi driver at a rank, a barrister must take the next case that arrives. And indeed, there are pros and cons to that have been raised, but the objective is to ensure that individuals can secure legal representation for their cases, regardless of how unpopular or contentious the case might be. And as we said before, a barrister must accept instructions if it is within their field of practice or experience, they are available, and if they are paid a proper professional fee. And there are exceptions and limitations such as conflict of interest, if you're unavailable or if you're unqualified, and also if there are issues with fees. So going back to the self-employed barrister and employed barrister dichotomy or difference. So in terms of self-employed, the pros are high earning potential, independence and flexible working. The cons are high financial risk, it's an administrative burden, and you haven't got a job security. And I've got some of those points from All About Law, an article written on the 1st of November 2025. And employed barristers make up around 20% of the bar, and the structure is they are employed by a sole organisation. For example, in-house firms like Brown Jacobson and DWF have a pupillage that they offer each year. You could be working for the Crown Prosecution Service, you could be working for HMRC. Your income is guaranteed monthly salary, pension, paid holiday and sick leave. You've got tax and national insurance deducted via the PAYE, and the workload is provided by your employer, so you've got less autonomy. You have to do the cases that you are given. In terms of the pros, you've got stability, life balance. That's great for those who sometimes feel they're easily burnt out. That will provide the work-life balance, which is an essential wherever you are. And the collaborative environment, because you're working alongside people more often. But the cons are a lower top tier earning potential and less flexibility in choosing work. So essentially you'll have to weigh up the pros and cons of each, and you decide where you want to go. But either way, employed or self-employed, you are a barrister. So going into self-employed and employed dichotomy, we can speak about that a little bit more on future episodes as well. When you're asking yourself the question, is the bar right for me? You've got to ask yourself, are you resilient? Resilience is pushing through obstacles and achieving, things despite your challenges. Resilience is another key quality because the bar is highly competitive. I think I read somewhere the other day that the bar is one of the most competitive careers in the UK. So from securing mini pupillages and scholarships to obtaining pupillage itself, the journey requires persistence. I'm grateful to have been awarded a scholarship, and I'll speak more about that in a few other episodes, and that's going to help me on my journey to the bar. So the journey requires persistence. You've got to keep going, and it reminds me of this mantra, this whole podcast, which is pivot and don't panic. There will, inevitably be moments where things don't go as planned. Life is unpredictable. But, what they're looking for is how you respond. Do you pivot or do you panic? And whether you are willing to keep developing your skills and learning from each experience. So taking feedback not as a negative, but just as an opportunity to grow. I think the attraction of the bar comes from the opportunity to engage deeply with legal questions and contribute to discussions about justice and fairness, and the ability to advocate for a client, analyse a legal issue, and indeed present a structured argument is something I find incredibly rewarding, and that's something I have garnered through my own academic and professional and lived experiences. But something else that can help you to determine if the bar's right for you. If you're saying, Faith, how can I, ascertain, how can I find out if the bar's right for me? Is simply exposure. Being exposed to something, attending court hearings, applying for mini pupillages, I think that's really, really important. Attending court hearings, applying for mini pupillages, engaging in mooting or debating. I was part of a debating club, KCL-UNA. I won the Most Improved Award at King's College London. I'm, joining advocacy experiences in clubs. Last week I was at a pupillage prep event, and I had to do a 3-minute presentation on the cab rank rule, and that essentially is exposure. So yeah, mini pupillages. What is a mini pupillage? Well, a mini pupillage is a brief stint in chambers shadowing a barrister. I've done 2 mini pupillages. I'm looking for more mini pupillages. I did my first one with 4 New Square, and I did my second one with 3PB, and I've been part of a COMBAR scheme. And I think also mentorship. I've had the privilege of being mentored by 4 barristers, 3 self-employed and 1 employed, and that's just given me a sense of, awareness as to what the bar requires of me. Mooting and debating, we've spoken about that. The difference between mooting and debating is really simple. So let's talk about differences and similarities. So mooting is primarily based on law and specific scenarios. Debate is more general. So for example, at KCL, it was debating because it's politics. Whereas at the University of Law, I've been doing mooting. It's legally nuanced questions. But both require responding to questions, whether it be from judges or from points of information in debating. and both demand extensive research. So either one you do doesn't really matter, but I definitely try and do a little bit more, lean more onto the mooting side because it is innately legal. Speaking with barristers about their day-to-day work. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to go and stand in front of a chambers and wait for barristers to come out. It just means that you do the mini pupilages, you go onto LinkedIn, and you build your profile and you connect with people who are like-minded and people who are at the bar, and just connect with them and just say, hi, so-and-so, hi person X, love your profile. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions? They might say no, that's fine. But you just move on and you find somebody who has the time. And if they say no, it's not always going to be personal to you. That barristers are very busy, they've got a lot to do. I've gone through the COMBAR scheme, I've gone through the Young Legal Aid Lawyers, the University of Law's mentoring scheme, and I've also gone through the Centre for Women's Justice, and that's given me mentorship opportunities. Now, COMBAR is the Commercial Bar Association, and it's a specialist association of the English and Welsh Bar for commercial barristers advising the international business community, and that's from their website. But they do mentorship and scholarships, and I was honoured to be accepted on the 2022 mentorship scheme, and that's where I met my first barrister mentor, and that just helped me to shape my journey. 4 years later, the opportunity of shadowing a barrister also led to my first mini pupillage. We've spoken about how you can get exposure, because observing the profession firsthand can give you valuable insight into actually, is it right for me or is it not for me? One of the main questions is, why do you want to be a barrister? Now, that is your opportunity to really succinctly but go into what you have done. I was on a University of Law prep session, and one of the questions was, if you weren't going to be a barrister, what would you be? And they might ask you, why don't you want to be a solicitor? I've networked with solicitors, I've shadowed them, and for me, I love what they're doing, but I need that extra touch and flair of advocacy. So it's really about trying to figure out what are you going to say in those questions. And I really find it helpful to attend webinars. I sign up to loads of webinars and events because you've got to understand what they do in that role, and that will give you an edge. But also try and be unique with your answers. The experiences make you unique, and it's good to tabernacle on those, but relate them into why you want to get to the bar. And I think what's really important to remember is that the bar is not the only path within the legal profession. Some people discover that they prefer the collaborative environment of a law firm or another legal career altogether. And the key takeaway here is to explore the options available and reflect on where your interests and your skills align. And that is really a personal decision. I know for me, as I said, I want to be a barrister. But you might end up actually saying, do you know what? I actually don't want to be a barrister. I actually want to be a solicitor. And there are other, legal roles beyond that. Because if I was going to Google and I just type in legal roles, you've got paralegals, you've got chartered legal executives, you've got company secretaries, judges, arbitrators or mediators, litigants conveyancers, legal advisors working in courts, and legal secretaries, coroners. So really, it's interesting when you actually delve deeper what you can find. It's like when you dive into the sea, there's so much treasure beneath the surface, but you don't find that treasure unless you take time to go and dive deep. So I do love my analogies. But additionally, I'd say if you are currently considering a career at the bar, you need to start building a success profile. And really, it's about developing those core skills that barristers rely on. Number one, strong analytical thinking, clear written communication, effective oral advocacy, and the ability to remain calm and structured under pressure. You build those experiences through work experience, mooting, debating, shadowing, mini pupilages, or even jobs that are not relatively legal. I've worked in Selfridges and Oxford Street. I've volunteered. I've run a CIC for 6 years, a community interest company. So essentially, it's all those transferable skills are helping me to build my soft skills of communication, my soft skills of adaptability, and so on. Mooting writing competitions, essay competitions. Essay competitions are a really good way to gain exposure. There are loads out there, and they sometimes do come with mini pupilages or mentorship opportunities if you win. And even if you don't win, you're building your skill set. The next thing is advocacy competitions as well, mooting competitions, public speaking opportunities, legal research projects. Even being an intern at a global firm or a national firm can really help to build your confidence. Mentoring and being mentored, outreach work, because every experience really contributes to your development as a future advocate. Ultimately, understanding and knowing whether the bar is right for you comes down to a combination of these three things: interest, skills, and persistence. It is a demanding path, but for those who are passionate about advocacy and justice, it can be an incredibly fulfilling one. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, please do share it with somebody who might also be considering a career at the bar, or somebody who's simply exploring their options. You can stay connected with me and follow the journey by subscribing to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, or Good Pods. For more insights on law, career development, and personal growth, you can follow me on social media at Faith Brynel Talks Law or at Faith Brynel Pomel on LinkedIn, or visit the Faith Brynel's Insights platform as well. And that is on YouTube, which is actually now being renamed for you all helpfully to Faith Brynel Talks Law. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review. It really helps the podcast to reach more aspiring lawyers. We're now in 53 countries, everybody, and I want to get to more countries, so please do write a review. But also students who are navigating their own journey into the legal profession. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the next episode of the Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast. Remember, pivot and don't panic.